My 35-year-old dad started his equipment supply business out of a storage unit in Houston back in the 1980s. 3 decades later, it was doing $4,200,000 in revenue out of a 50,000-square-foot facility in North Dallas. I'd put in 15 years, first learning inventory during high school summers, then operations after college, and finally modernizing the whole back-end system 4 years ago. The business was solid, supplying Texas stock industrial equipment for oil fields, construction sites, and manufacturing plants. High-end generators, specialized hydraulic systems, custom fabrication equipment, the kind of gear that keeps the Texas economy running but nobody outside the industry ever thinks about. Our client list included most of the major players in the state's energy sector. Dad never missed a chance to remind everyone he built it from nothing, despite the $80,000 loan from my grandfather that he never paid back. He conveniently left that part out of his bootstrapping story. In today's money, that's around $200,000 of startup capital he got for free, not exactly the self-made narrative he pushed. My brother, 27-year-old Damien, was a different story. While I was counting inventory on 102-degree warehouse days, he was at SMU, then wasting time in Europe networking. Mom and Dad paid for everything: tuition, apartment, car. The convertible BMW he wrecked sophomore year was replaced within a week. When he finally joined the business 4 years ago, Dad gave him a VP title despite having zero experience. Mom was always his biggest defender. When Damien totaled that BMW, it was her who convinced Dad to replace it immediately. She needs reliable transportation for networking events, she'd insisted, while I was driving a 10-year-old Camry with 180,000 miles that I'd paid for myself. She never pushed for me the way she did for him. Damien majored in communications, which basically meant he spent 4 years partying and making connections with other rich kids. His resume consisted of 1 summer internship at a marketing firm where his college roommate's dad was the CEO. Yet somehow, Dad thought he was qualified to run sales at a multi-million-dollar industrial equipment company. I still remember the day Damien first showed his true colors at work. We'd landed a major oil company contract, and I'd spent 6 months setting up the logistics and building a custom inventory system for their specific needs. We're talking 3 a.m. nights, weekends sacrificed, my girlfriend at the time breaking up with me because I was married to the job. On the day of the final presentation to their procurement team, Damien waltzed in 20 minutes late, took over my PowerPoint, and introduced himself as the architect behind this partnership. When the client asked a technical question about implementation timelines, Damien fumbled, so I jumped in with the answer. Later that day, he cornered me in the warehouse. "Don't ever make me look bad in front of clients again," he said, jabbing his finger at my chest. "I just answered their question," I replied. "Next time, write it down and pass me a note. I'm the face of sales now. You're the back-end guy. Know your place." I should have quit that day. Instead, I swallowed my pride and kept working, telling myself I was doing it for the company my dad built, not for Damien's ego. The oil company contract ended up being worth $1,700,000 in the first year alone, but guess whose name was on the commission paperwork? Not mine. Last year, I found proof Damien was inflating his commission numbers. He'd take credit for renewals that were automatic, claim deals that other sales guys had closed, and even create phantom leads that magically converted last minute to hit quarterly targets. I showed Dad the evidence, a spreadsheet comparison that took me a week to compile, and he brushed it off as how business gets done in Texas. I'd spent the last 2 quarters quietly documenting everything, building my case, keeping receipts. I wasn't planning to use any of it, but something told me to be prepared. Call it instinct from 15 years of watching my dad operate. Then one day, I noticed my dad's missed call. It was 6:42 p.m. on a Thursday, and I had just closed our biggest deal of the quarter without Damien's help. We weren't exactly the daily check-in type of family, so I figured it had to be something about the quarterly numbers. I hit play on the voicemail and continued packing up my stuff, half listening as I shoved my laptop into its case. "Don't bother coming to the family reunion, we're cutting ties." I froze, one hand still on my laptop zipper. 7 words, delivered in the same flat tone he'd used to cancel a lunch meeting. I stood there for a minute, his voice echoing in my head. The message was cold and efficient, like terminating a contract. After all the years I'd put into the family business, all the weekends I'd sacrificed, all the personal relationships I'd put on hold to help build his empire, this is how he ends it? A voicemail. The family reunion was our annual thing at my dad's ranch in the hill country, happening since I was a kid. It wasn't just a family gathering, it was also when we discussed the business direction for the coming year, hashed out major decisions, and set compensation. Cutting me out of that was cutting me out of the business. Through my office window, I could see Damien and Dad's office, both of them looking at paperwork, nodding. Dad never consulted with me that way anymore. Now it all made sense. They weren't just planning next quarter, they were planning my exit. I picked up my phone, my thumbs hovering over the screen. A dozen replies ran through my mind, each one angrier than the last. But finally, I just typed a single word: understood. If he wanted to end things, fine. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation, but if he thought he could cut me out without consequences, he had another thing coming. I reached down and pulled out the thick leather-bound ledger from my bottom drawer. There was my name and neat signature in black ink next to my parents'. With a slow, deliberate stroke, I crossed my name off. The sound of the pen cutting through the paper felt like a physical act of separation. I took a photo of the modified document with my phone, then opened my email and wrote a message to my personal lawyer. I attached the photo and typed, "Need to talk tomorrow. Family business situation changing. Let's discuss options." I hit send, locked my office door, and walked out of the building without looking back. If my father wanted to play this game, I wasn't going to let him hold my future hostage. The next day, I acted fast, canceled my flight to the Hill Country Ranch where the reunion was happening, erased the date from my calendar, and sent an email to my parents confirming my intention to step away from the business and requesting a full financial audit. No pleasantries, no attempts to patch things up, just the cold, clear language of a businessman walking away from a bad deal. 15 years of my life in that company. 15 years of missed vacations, canceled dates, and postponed plans. For what? To be cut out with a 7-word voicemail. I'd given up a job offer at Amazon's logistics division after college to help Dad expand the business. And for what? So Damien could waltz in and take over. I quietly pulled my name from the business loan documents where I was listed as a guarantor. This wasn't an emotional decision, it was pure risk management. If they were cutting me out, I made a few calls to my lawyer to initiate the separation process. It wasn't emotional, it was strategic. My dad taught me that business is business. I was just applying his lesson. While I waited for my lawyer to call back, I backed up every relevant document I had access to. Financial reports, client lists, vendor contracts, anything that might be useful if things got ugly. Not to steal, but to protect myself. When you've spent 15 years building systems, you know exactly where the bones are buried. An hour after I sent my email, Damien texted me. "Always knew you'd bail when things got tough. Don't worry, I've got plenty of ideas to fix your outdated systems. Bet Dad wishes he'd put me in charge years ago." I didn't respond. No point adding fuel to the fire. I just took a screenshot from my records and kept working on my exit strategy. Damien had always been a talker, not a doer. His ideas typically involved spending money we didn't have on consultants we didn't need. The next morning I got a text from Matthew, one of the warehouse managers who'd been with us for a decade. "Your dad just called an emergency meeting, announced Damien's taking over your position, effective immediately." The guy couldn't tell a circuit breaker from a fuse box if his life depended on it. Apparently, Damien had been telling Dad I was planning to start my own competing business and stealing client information for months. Complete nonsense. But Damien had always had Dad wrapped around his finger. I spent that night copying all relevant files to my personal storage, taking screenshots of admin access pages, and documenting everything I'd built or implemented. I knew exactly how this would play out. 36 hours later, my phone lit up with a tidal wave of missed calls. 78 from my mother alone, dozens more from my sister, and a handful from my father. I scrolled through the panicked texts, frantic voicemails, and increasingly desperate emails. My father's messages started with cautious, probing questions, like someone testing thin ice. But as the hours passed and my silence grew longer, they became more urgent, his words tinged with something I hadn't heard in his voice in years: fear. "Hugo, you need to call me about the credit line paperwork. It's important. Son, we can discuss it like men. Call me back. Hugo, this isn't a game. The company's at stake here." His accountant, a humorless man from Austin I never liked, left a message that crackled with anxiety. "Hugo, we need to talk urgently. The credit line is in jeopardy without your signature." I leaned back in my chair and let a slow smile cross my face. I'd given them a head start, but now the storm had hit, and I was just getting started. See, what my dad and Damien didn't realize was that 4 years ago, when I modernized our entire business infrastructure, I'd made myself essential to the operation. Not intentionally, I'd actually documented everything meticulously. But some things you just can't transfer in a day. Things like the personal relationships I'd built with our main suppliers, the custom code that kept our inventory system running, and the specialized knowledge of our clients' needs that I'd accumulated over years. By the third day, the messages had gone from confused to desperate. My mother's voicemails were breathless, her words tumbling over each other. My sister Ariel tried a softer approach. "Hey Hugo, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Let's talk." I didn't answer. Ariel meant well, but I knew my dad too well to think this was just a misunderstanding. On the fourth day, I got an email from the bank that runs our family business accounts. I opened it cautiously, bracing myself for whatever new disaster my parents had cooked up. As I scanned the document, my jaw dropped. My father and Damien had quietly tried to transfer all the remaining funds into a separate account in their names only. They'd even initiated the paperwork to dissolve the original LLC, effectively cutting me out of the picture entirely. The only reason the bank flagged it was because my name was still on some of the original documents, and my signature was required for major financial changes per our operating agreement, an agreement I'd insisted on when we restructured 4 years ago, a detail Dad had probably forgotten about in his rush to push me out. That was it. My dad wasn't just trying to break up the family, he and Damien were trying to cut me off completely, cleanly, for good. They probably thought I'd be too stunned or hurt to act. They didn't realize that by crossing that line, they'd given me the perfect excuse to hit back. I took a deep breath, then called my lawyer. We had a long, intense conversation, and by the end of it, the wheels were in motion for something much bigger than just removing my name from a business loan. "They've made this easy for us," my lawyer said. "Attempted financial fraud is pretty straightforward. But are you sure you want to go this route? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." I didn't hesitate, I'm sure. They started this war. I'm just making sure I win it. The next morning, I pulled together every scrap of paper I had on the family business. I spent hours compiling a comprehensive dossier highlighting every shady move, every questionable expense, every suspicious transaction my father and brother had ever made. Years of bottled-up frustration fueled my focus. Dad's habit of categorizing personal expenses as business write-offs, Damien's inflated commission reports, the consulting fees paid to my cousin's web design company that never actually delivered a website, the cash deals with certain vendors that mysteriously never appeared in the official books. It was all there, meticulously documented. When I was done, I had a thick, damning stack of evidence. I filed an official complaint with the bank and froze all accounts pending a full audit. I also filed a request with the IRS to investigate possible tax fraud, attaching the most incriminating pieces from my dossier. I didn't know if it would stick, but I was willing to find out. Finally, just for good measure, I sent the whole package to my father's biggest client, a longtime family friend who I knew wouldn't like the idea of being involved in a potentially fraudulent deal. Jim had known my grandfather and had given my dad his first big contract. He was old-school Texas oil money, a man who valued loyalty and straight dealing above all else. I knew he wouldn't take kindly to learning how my father had been operating. I expected retaliation, but I was prepared. I'd already secured all my personal finances, moved my assets to new accounts, and made sure my name was off any company credit lines. Let them come at me. I was no longer exposed. That night, I sat at my apartment window overlooking downtown Dallas, watching the city lights blink on. Part of me felt a twinge of regret about how things had escalated. But another part, the part that remembered every slight, every time Damien was favored, every dismissal of my contributions, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. My phone buzzed with a text from Matthew at the warehouse. "Chaos here today. Your brother tried to access the inventory system and somehow managed to crash the server. Your dad's been yelling all day. Hope whatever's going on works out, man." I smiled grimly. They were learning just how much they had relied on me, and it had only been 4 days. That night, my phone buzzed again. It was Ariel. I hesitated before answering. "Hugo, I know you're angry, and I don't blame you. But can we talk, just you and me?" I paused, weighing my options. Despite everything, I didn't want to drag her into the middle of this mess. She'd always been the reasonable one, trying to keep things functional when Dad's ego flared up. "All right," I finally said. "Let's meet tomorrow." The next day, I met Ariel at a barbecue joint in North Dallas. She was already there, waiting at a corner table, keeping an eye on the door. When she saw me, she straightened up a bit, but her expression remained serious. Ariel had always been the bridge between me and the rest of the family, 3 years younger than me, 5 years older than Damien. She'd perfected the art of neutrality in family conflicts. "Hugo, what's going on?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "Dad's losing it. Mom's a wreck. They think you're trying to destroy the business, and Damien is just making everything worse, threatening to sue you left and right." She deserved to know the truth, but I didn't want to drag her deeper into the mess. "They tried to cut me out completely," I said. "Dad and Damien have been moving money into a separate account, trying to dissolve the LLC behind my back. I'm just making sure they can't burn me on the way out." Her eyes widened. "That can't be right. Dad wouldn't just— No, there must be some mistake. What about Damien? Would he?" I asked pointedly. She looked away, unable to deny it. Damien had always been manipulative, even with her. He'd borrowed money from her college fund once, promising to pay it back, but never did. Dad covered it up, of course. I pushed a thin folder across the table. It contained carefully selected pages. Just enough to make my point without overwhelming her. Bank transfer requests, questionable invoices, and emails where my father and Damien had explicitly asked their accountant to speed up the separation process. She flipped through the papers. Jesus Christ, this is a lot of money, Hugo. She paused, her fingers tapping a highlighted statement. $75,000 just gone. Yes, I said, leaning back, and that's just the beginning. They've been siphoning off funds for months, maybe years. I caught a transfer of $150,000 to a private account in their names, marked business development expenses. I leaned closer. Ariel, if I hadn't reacted when I did, I'd be on the hook for all of it. My name is on those loan documents and tax forms. I could have been legally liable. She closed the folder and pressed her palm flat against it. You have to talk to them, she said firmly. There's got to be another explanation. He's not usually this stupid. And Damien? I asked. She didn't answer. I gave them a chance to explain. You know what Dad did? He left me a 7-word voicemail that broke up the family. Then he put Damien in my position the very next day. Just please, don't destroy everything, she said. Mom's already talking about selling the house. If this blows up, I don't know what they'll do. I'm not the one who started this, Ariel, but I promise you I'm going to finish it. That evening, I got a notice from the bank. The freeze on the company accounts had gone through. My lawyer had leveraged the operating agreement I'd insisted on 4 years ago, the one requiring unanimous member approval for transfers exceeding $50,000, along with evidence of unauthorized transactions. The bank had flagged over $250,000 in suspicious transactions, with several large sums still pending transfer. I pictured my father and Damien in that Austin limestone office, watching the numbers tick down, their carefully built financial empire unraveling by the hour. I wasn't just cutting myself loose, I was setting the whole ship on fire. I knew the business well enough to understand what a frozen account meant. Vendors wouldn't get paid, payroll would be delayed, the line of credit they relied on for major purchases would be jeopardized. It was the corporate equivalent of a heart attack. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing like crazy. My email inbox was flooded with notifications from the bank, my lawyer, and panicked messages from my father's accountant. The audit had come sooner than expected, and it was clearly making waves. I scrolled through the latest updates from the bank. They'd frozen over $400,000 in assets across several accounts and flagged another $200,000 in unexplained withdrawals going back 6 months. It was a financial stranglehold, enough to shut down the business operations completely. My father had left 3 voicemails overnight, each one more desperate than the last. Hugo, son, please. I don't know what you think you know, but you're making a terrible mistake. Call me back immediately. We can work this out. I deleted the messages without responding. An hour later, Ariel called again. Hugo, what did you do? She asked, her voice steady but strained. I did what I had to do, I replied evenly. They're freaking out, Hugo. Dad's talking about lawyers, about pressing charges for sabotage. Mom's in full panic mode, and Damien is making wild promises about fixing everything if they just give him full control. I wasn't surprised. They'd never been good at handling when their plans went sideways. I gave them a chance. Dad made his move, Damien took my position, and I made my countermove. I'm not backing down. There was a long silence on the other end. Fine, meet with them, she said finally. One last time, for me. I hesitated. I owed Ariel at least that much. All right, I said, but this is the last time. As I hung up, my lawyer called with an update. The bank's preliminary audit had already turned up enough red flags to warrant a more thorough investigation. My father and Damien were looking at potential fraud charges if things kept going this way. You need to decide how far you want to take this, he said. Right now, you've got leverage. They're scared. This might be the time to negotiate a settlement that cuts you loose with your fair share. I considered it. A settlement would be cleaner, faster, but something in me resisted. This wasn't just about money anymore. We met at my parents' house in North Dallas that night. I'd grown up in this house, spent my teenage years in the bedroom upstairs, brought my first girlfriend to dinner at that dining table. Now it felt like enemy territory. My mother opened the door with a forced smile and a quick hug. She looked tired. Inside, my father was standing in the living room, arms crossed, looking like he owned the world. Damien sat in the leather chair like it was a throne, legs spread wide, feigning confidence despite the situation. Sit down, my father demanded. I dropped into a chair, noting how every family photo featured Damien front and center, with me pushed to the side. Had it always been that way, or was I just noticing it now? So what's this about? I asked. My father turned to me, face flushed. What the hell do you think you're doing, Hugo? Freezing the accounts? Getting an audit? You're trying to destroy everything I built. I met his gaze directly. I'm destroying things? After you tried to cut me out without warning? You think I wouldn't notice $250,000 disappearing into a private account? You think I'm just going to sit back while you and Damien gut the company I helped build? Damien stood up, pointing at me. You've always been resentful of Dad's success. You've been trying to undermine me from day one. My father's face hardened. You have no idea what you've done, he said. I've got deals in the pipeline, investments in place. Damien has relationships with new clients. If you freeze these accounts, it could ruin everything. That's not my problem, I shot back. You made your decision when you tried to cut me out of the business and replace me with Damien. I'm just protecting what's mine. There was a long silence. Then Damien leaned back in his chair with a smirk. Don't worry, Dad. I'll modernize the company now that Hugo's out of the way. His systems are ancient. I've got contacts at Oracle who can set us up with real enterprise solutions. I laughed. Damien had never even logged into our inventory system, let alone understood it. Damien's right, my father said. We were planning to update the whole operation anyway. This is just accelerating the timeline. I looked at my father and saw something I'd never noticed before. He was scared. Beneath all the blustering and threats, he was terrified that his empire was slipping away. And instead of facing reality, he was doubling down on the fantasy that Damien could somehow save everything. My dad leaned in, voice low and threatening. Fine. You want to play hardball? You want to burn this family down? I'll show you what it really looks like. I held his gaze. I'd come too far to back down now. Ariel stepped between us. Stop, all of you. This isn't solving anything. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. You wanted me here, Ariel. I came, but I'm done trying to reason with them. I turned and walked out, shutting the door firmly behind me. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed with a new email, a message from my lawyer. My parents and Damien had just filed a lawsuit claiming I had sabotaged the business and illegally taken control of their accounts. I let out a short laugh and tossed my phone on the passenger seat. So this was how they wanted to play it? Fine, I'd given them a chance to walk away. Now I'd make sure they had nothing left to fight for. The lawsuit hit me harder than expected. My father and Damien had gone nuclear, accusing me of everything from embezzlement to corporate sabotage. Their claims were outrageous, but the stakes were real. If they convinced a judge I'd illegally seized the accounts, I could be on the hook for hundreds of thousands in damages. I'd expected them to be angry, but I hadn't expected them to be this stupid. It was like they were begging to be caught. I spent the next week buried in legal documents, my lawyer working overtime to counter each new motion they filed. They had even dragged Ariel into it, calling her as a witness against me, probably hoping to break my resolve. Then, 2 days before the first court date, I received a message from my father's accountant. Hugo, we need to meet in private. There are things you need to know. I met him that night at a roadhouse off Interstate 35. He was already there when I arrived, looking nervous. He waved me over, glancing around the room. Hugo, I shouldn't be here. If they find out. He nervously adjusted his glasses. The IRS has been sniffing around some of our filings. With a lawsuit and court-ordered audit, I could be looking at criminal charges for my part in this. I need to get ahead of this. Just tell me what this is about, I said, sitting across from him. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Your brother, he's been hiding money for years. Offshore accounts, shell companies, under-the-table cash deals. Your father only found out recently, but he's been covering for him. It's bad. I'd expected some financial misconduct, but this sounded much worse. How bad? Tax evasion, wire fraud, maybe money laundering? I've been cooking the books at their instruction for years, but this lawsuit, if it goes to discovery, we're all exposed. I can't risk my license, my freedom. He slid a flash drive across the table. Everything you need is on here. Bank statements, wire transfers, contracts. Your brother has been systematically bleeding the company dry for years, and your father has been helping cover it up. It's enough to sink them both. That night, I reviewed the files. It was all there. Over $750,000 had been quietly siphoned out of the company, with Damien's fingerprints all over it, and my father's signature approving most of it. There were equipment purchases that never happened, consulting fees paid to shell companies Damien controlled, and even a fake warehouse lease that was actually funding his condo in South Padre Island. My father had signed off on all of it, either knowingly or in willful ignorance. The next morning, I sent everything to my lawyer with a note. Let's get this over with. By the time the court date arrived, my parents and Damien were backed into a corner. Their accounts were frozen, their business reputation in tatters. And now, with this new evidence, they were staring down potential criminal charges. My father looked older as he entered the courtroom, his usual swagger gone. Damien wasn't even there. He had apparently gone out of town on business the night before. The judge took less than an hour to rule the evidence was overwhelming. The case was dismissed, and the court ordered a full forensic audit of my parents' finances and the business. I watched my father's face as reality set in. He hadn't just lost the business, he'd lost everything. Outside the courtroom, he approached me, shoulders slumped. "Hugo, you have to believe me. I didn't know how bad it was with Damien. I was just trying to protect him. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You chose him over me," I said quietly, "every time. And now you're paying for it." I walked away, leaving him standing there, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. A week later, Ariel called. She'd found our parents a small apartment in Arlington. She didn't ask for my help, and I didn't offer it. But I sent them enough for 3 months' rent, more for her sake than theirs. "Did you know about Damien? He's ruined them, Hugo. And they let him do it. They chose him over you, over me, over everything Dad spent his life building." I could hear the hurt in her voice. It wasn't just me who'd been betrayed. As for the business, it had imploded completely. The audit revealed that Damien had been siphoning money for years. The company was deeply in debt, and most of their major clients had jumped ship when the scandal hit the Dallas business press. The warehouse was shuttered, the equipment sold at auction. Damien had disappeared. Last Ariel heard, he was in Mexico, ignoring their calls, with about $300,000 of the company's money. I signed the final papers dissolving my connection to the business, severing the last financial ties between us. With my settlement money and industry connections, I was already 6 weeks into establishing my own operation in Oklahoma City. Different state, different market, similar industry. I'd secured a modest warehouse space, brought over 2 trusted employees from the Dallas operation, and started building something that was entirely mine. No family drama, no nepotism, just sound business practices. 3 months later, my father called directly. His voice was different, subdued, but still with that undertone of entitlement. "Hugo, we need to talk. Your mother and I, we've hit a rough patch. Damien has cleaned us out and disappeared. We were wrong. We need your help to rebuild the business." I let his words hang in the air. Part of me felt vindicated. The other part was just tired of the whole thing. "I'm sorry, Dad. That chapter of my life is closed. Come on, son. We have nothing left. We were wrong about you, wrong about Damien. We can start over, rebuild the business together, the right way this time. I still have connections across Texas." I took a deep breath. "No, you made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Your mother needs her medication. The insurance—" His voice broke for a moment. I felt a twinge in my chest but quickly suppressed it. He'd been manipulating me for years with guilt. "Not this time. I already talked to Ariel about that. She's handling Mom's prescriptions through her clinic. You'll be fine. You can't just abandon your family, Hugo. After all I've done for you." I almost laughed at that. "All you've done for me, Dad? I worked 15 years building your company while you handed everything to Damien on a silver platter. I'm done." I hung up and blocked his number. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have them in my life again in some small way, but I would never again tie my future to their judgment or put my financial security in their hands. My father taught me one valuable lesson after all. Business is business. Family is something else entirely. What do you guys think? Did I do the right thing by refusing to help them start over? It's been 6 months since my main post, and let me tell you, things went insane. Yesterday, the Dallas Morning News ran a story about a prominent local businessman's son being arrested in Puerto Vallarta. Yes, that was Damien. Local authorities picked him up at a beachfront condo where he'd been living under a fake name for the past 6 months. He's been extradited back to Texas and charged with wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The DA is talking 15 to 20 years if convicted on all counts. The paper made it sound like he'd been caught during a routine investigation, like maybe he got sloppy or someone recognized him or he pissed off the wrong person down there. He didn't. What the article didn't mention was that his location, evidence of his financial crimes, and a comprehensive paper trail documenting every illegal transaction had been delivered to the FBI, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and Texas Department of Banking exactly 30 days before his arrest, by me. When Damien disappeared to Mexico, I knew the game wasn't over. Half-finished jobs irritate me, always have. So while my parents were crying to Ariel about their lost fortune, I quietly hired a private investigator in Mexico City who specializes in finding people who don't want to be found. It took 2 months and cost me $45,000, but he located Damien living in a $7,000 per month oceanfront condo, driving a new Porsche, tan, and dating a local restaurant owner. The PI sent me photos of Damien lounging by the pool, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world, like he hadn't destroyed our family business and left our parents destitute. Basic lifestyle surveillance confirmed it was him. The PI got me his alias. He was going by Jack Stevens, his new phone number, and his banking information. From there, I built a comprehensive case. It turned out those offshore accounts the accountant had flagged were just the tip of the iceberg. Damien had been siphoning company funds since day one and had set up an elaborate network of shell companies to hide the money. He'd created fake vendor accounts that charged our company for non-existent services, set up dummy corporations in Nevada and Wyoming to receive consulting fees, and even had a fake property management company that supposedly leased equipment to us. Equipment we already owned. The full amount was close to $1,200,000, significantly more than the $300,000 my parents initially thought. I didn't do this for justice. I didn't do it to help my parents recover their money. I did it because I finish what I start. When I had everything in place, bank records, transfer confirmations, IP logs from his account login, even photos of him accessing the accounts from his Mexico hideout, I put together 3 identical packages, one for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, one for IRS Criminal Investigations, and one for the State Banking Commission. I added a detailed timeline, contact information for all relevant witnesses, including our family accountant, who was more than willing to cooperate to save his own skin, and a roadmap for prosecution. Then I sent them certified mail, no return address, and waited. I didn't expect them to move so quickly. Federal agencies typically take their time with white-collar cases, but apparently the evidence was too solid to ignore. Maybe they had him on their radar already for other scams. Either way, they moved. The FBI agent leading the case called me yesterday. Apparently, my name was all over the financial documents as the former operations director, so they wanted a statement. I gave them what they needed. They don't know I was the one who delivered the evidence, and they don't need to. Damien's facing federal charges now, according to his court-appointed attorney. Seems like his Mexico money didn't last long enough to hire a decent lawyer. He's trying to make a deal, offering to testify against our father for a reduced sentence. Classic Damien, always looking for the easy way out. Dad will likely face charges too. While he might get a slightly lighter sentence since Damien was the primary architect, at his age, even a 5-year sentence could mean spending his remaining good years behind bars. My parents' remaining assets have been frozen pending the outcome of the case. Ariel says they might lose the apartment I paid for. She asked if I'd help them again. I didn't. The old company is officially dead. Its assets were liquidated months ago. Its reputation buried. My new operation in Oklahoma crossed the $1 million revenue mark last quarter. I've hired good people, implemented solid systems, and built something clean and functional from the ground up. No family drama, no hidden agendas, no Damien. He'll spend years in federal prison wondering who built the case against him. Was it the accountant, a vengeful client, some random banker who spotted irregularities? It'll eat at him daily, but he'll never know it was me. He'll never understand the level of detail and planning that went into his downfall. Some might call it revenge. I just call it closing the loop. As for my parents, they made their choice when they cut me out with that 7-word voicemail. They'll have to live with the consequences. Ariel's still caught in the middle, and I help her when I can. But that chapter with my parents is closed for good. In the end, Damien taught me something too. Always check who's moving pieces behind the scenes. Business is business.